Arise, transcend thyself. Thou art man, and the whole nature of man is to become more than himself.
Namaskar, respected Anjali ma'am, Ramini ma'am, Anmolji, our esteemed guest, dear colleagues and children. We welcome you to the fourth edition of Spiritual Retreat, Day 9, Session 2. It's an honor and privilege for me to introduce our speaker of the day, our beloved Anjali ma'am. Mrs. Anjali Jaipuria, Vice Chairperson, Integral Education Society and Chairperson, Oxygen Education Society, is an educationist with a vision for fundamental change in the Indian educational system. She combines her love for Vedic wisdom and its relationship with the needs of economic, social, and political conditions of today, creating contemporary learning materials. She studies Sri Aurobindo and the Mother's evolutionary work, integral yoga, and educational reform, the Vedas, the Upanishads, and the Bhagavad Gita. She has been teaching the Bhagavad Gita in the light of Sri Aurobindo to a group of aspirants since 2015. With the help of Sri Aurobindo Ashram, ma'am created Dev Bhasha, a conversational Sanskrit curriculum which was introduced in 2003 as the third language from pre-primary to grade 8. Dev Bhasha has been instrumental in instilling values in students in a never-before way. Ma'am has introduced out-of-the-box projects from grade 5 to grade 9, aimed at raising the consciousness. To fulfill her dreams of giving level playing field to all children in 2003, Ma'am started Navsrijan, an English medium school for the underserved, imparting the same education as St. Emma Jaipuria School to 300 students at present who are living on the margins of poverty. Following Jaipuria tradition, we would like to observe 30 seconds of silence to invoke the blessings of divine. Now we request ma'am to enlighten us with her words of wisdom on the topic. Ma'am is transitional being, he is not final. For the last day, last session, what better than this, ma'am?
Over these last 9 days, everything that we've heard has actually taken us forward towards this last session of ours. Man is a transitional being. He is not final. And what is the way forward if we are not final? Evolution is the way forward. Some of you must have already heard this workshop we've already had on man as a transitional being. But it doesn't matter, because these things have to be heard again and again and again and again till they become part of our DNA. So if you've heard it once, by hearing it again, it will just become more affirmed in your being. And as the last time, I'm going to start with a story that you have heard many times from me. My story begins from that point in history when we were all still apes. And I heard a whisper. The whisper said, change. For you must change. You will change. I set that voice aside. It made no sense to me. We were such a perfect ape community. So perfect. We could stand on 2 feet so steadily. We were steady on 2 feet. We didn't have to crawl on 4. We could peel a banana and eat it so gracefully. We were so strong and so deftly we could swing from one tree to the other. I just felt I was perfect. I was so perfect, the epitome of creation. Change. What change is this voice that is whispering in me telling me about? But that voice, she kept on whispering. She kept on saying to me, you have no choice. You will change. But again, I set her aside. But that voice of the evolutionary force did not relent. She used my ape body as her laboratory, and she created a human being from within it. What do you feel the ape was feeling at that time? What do you feel the ape was feeling when his body was being used as a laboratory and something else was emerging from him? Maybe there was some surpassing yet subconscious aspiration within some of us apes. As if some mold had to be broken, as if some birth pang for a new delivery was happening within us. And let us remember one thing very importantly. What was trying to burst forth within our ape body was not a super ape. It was not an improvement on the ape. It was something entirely new. What were the powers that we were getting? The power of deliberate thinking, the power of self-consciousness, the power of foresight, the power of reasoning, the power of engineering. All these powers were striving to manifest, striving to grow from within. It was actually a new power of consciousness that was laboring to be delivered from within the ape. At this stage, the ape must have gone through an evolutionary crisis, which was far beyond its comprehension. उसको समझ ही नहीं आया होगा. What is happening? What is happening to me? The new species was born. The human being was born. And the ape's body was used as a laboratory for creating the human being. And who used it? The evolutionary force used the ape's body as a laboratory to transmute it and give birth to man. Now, some apes evolved into man. What did man have to give up? And what did man get? This is a question that we all need to think about. So, man had to abandon his vital, his physical agility and ability. You know how strong apes are? Are we that strong? No. So, man had to give up his vital and physical agility and ability of the ape. And in exchange, what did we get? In exchange, we got the mental abilities of reasoning, of intelligence, of foresight, of intuition later on. Man had to abandon the physical agility of the ape. Instead, he acquired the mental abilities of intelligence and reasoning. What else had man to give up? See, the ape was under a natural selection. Shakti selected, the evolutionary force selected those apes which were ready for that transmutation to happen. And the rest of the apes were left behind. But now, in human beings, that choice has been given to us. We have to become aware of our own choices, our own weaknesses, our own strengths. Only those of us who are willing to collaborate with Shakti are going to evolve. The rest of us will be left behind like some of the apes got left behind. Man was no longer subject to natural selection alone. Instead, he became subject to his own choices, weaknesses, and strengths. Now, when we look at apes even now, and we look at the forest, the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, there is a subconscious harmony amongst them, right? It is an absolute harmony in the animal world and the plant world. But is there such a harmony between us and the plant world? Are we so harmonious with the environment? No. So what have we lost? We have lost our subconscious and spontaneous harmony with nature. And what have we been propelled upon? We have been propelled on a new trajectory in which we have to work to find that harmony with plant kingdom, with animal kingdom, with the environment. Not only that, we have been propelled on a trajectory where we have to find harmony within ourselves. There has to be a harmony of the soul with the physical being with the vital being with the mental being with the higher spiritual being. Man had to abandon his subconscious and spontaneous harmony with nature. Instead, he got propelled on a new trajectory to establish a conscious harmony within himself and with nature and all beings. Now, we have started believing that We are on the final rung of the evolutionary ladder, the epitome of creation. Didn't the ape feel the same way? The ape felt that who can be better than me? I'm standing on my toes. I'm the best. And this is the way man believes himself to be. Today, we mankind are actually standing at a very critical stage of our evolutionary journey. Of course, we've made great progress from the time of Stone Age, when we were the barbaric man. From then to now, we've made great progress. Please type in the chat box, what all progress have we made? Scientific progress, Sarthak Mishra is saying. Very good. And what else? Fast. Technological progress. Very good, Akshay. Technological progress. What else? Logical. We have made progress in science, technology, medicine, literature, telecommunication, yes, art, sports, transportation, commerce. So many ways we've made progress. In the mental and scientific realm, we have made immense progress, no doubt. What are the two fields in which we have not made real progress? Where we've remained stunted, where we've remained dwarfed? Which are those two fields where we have remained dwarfed? No. Spiritual. Yes, in the realm of ethics and in the realm of spirituality, we have remained dwarfed. We have not made enough progress. And we have chosen to remain dwarfed. It is unfortunate that we human beings now believe ourselves to be the goal of those millions and millions and millions of years of striving. Have we reached that point where we have reached, where we are the goal? Is this the goal? Is this what we want to be? You see, we seem to be rotating in a vicious circle. And in that vicious circle, we've forgotten our deepest aspiration. Our deepest aspiration is Swarajya, that we are in control of ourselves, that we are able to exceed ourselves, become better versions of ourselves, and then become even better versions of ourselves. That is our deepest aspiration. But we have forgotten about that. And due to this disharmony and disrespect that we've had for natural resources, we are going to face unsurmountable problems because of global warming, because of religious and political terrorism that we are seeing amidst us. It is so sad. This is showing that spiritually and ethically, we have chosen to remain dwarfed. Rationality cannot give us all the answers. Can rationality give all the answers? No. You see, mankind is in a state of crisis. Real crisis. And what is the way forward? What is the way out of this crisis? In terms of evolution, Sri Aurobindo said, and he writes in the Hour of God, man is a transitional being. He is not final. Let us just think about it. For just 30 seconds, let us meditate on these words and ask Sri Aurobindo to explain to us what is it that we have to do to ascend from here to the next step, next stage. My submission to you is that at the root of all our problems today lies the crisis of human evolution. And this crisis is looking at us in our face. In Sri Aurobindo's words, at present, mankind is undergoing an evolutionary crisis in which is concealed a choice of its destiny. You know, what we choose creates our destiny. We can't say the destiny is written. I will sit at home, never do any sports, never look after my body. I will sit and eat pizzas and I will just manage my studies. Even if I pass, it's good enough. Well, you're writing your own destiny. You can't say it is predestined. The choice is yours. You don't know what is predestined. So at present, mankind is undergoing an evolutionary crisis in which is concealed a choice of its destiny. If man has not reached the final rung of the evolutionary staircase, then what we may ask is the next rung. Agle step pe hai kya? That man has to know. At this stage, I may safely say that what is needed for further evolution is not a maximizing of the mind, that the mind will become a genius, it will become beyond Einstein, or we will become like sages and we'll become like saints, or we will become technical geniuses. No. What is striving to come out of us is something very different. Something inside the human being is striving to manifest a new grade of consciousness. Satyam said, this is the time for something else, and something else which is not the same thing with improvements. This is the time for something else which is not the same thing with improvements. Satyam. What is hidden between the lines here is that this new consciousness that will manifest in the new species will be as different from man as man is different from the ape. That will be the difference. What we are speaking of is a great leap. It's like a leap into the new species. And remember when I talked about this in the last session, of course, it was 2 years back. The leap will be into luminous beings. Yes, Akshad, a leap which will happen by the help of the conscious transformation that we will continuously do within our whole being, our mental being, our vital being, our physical being. Then we will be able to take that leap into the new species, which will be luminous beings of light, love, power, and bliss. The new species will be luminous beings. They'll be full of light. They will be full of light, love, power, and bliss. Do these 4 names resonate with something? Can somebody type in the chat box what these 4, light, love, power, and bliss, what do they resonate with in the school? Positivity, divinity. Yes. Who said our school houses, ma'am? 4 houses. Yes, Aditya, Saransh, very good. Light, wisdom. Love, harmony. Power, strength. Bliss will be after we reach the stage of perfection. So, the evolutionary force made the choice herself which apes are fit enough to be used as a laboratory and to be transmuted into the human being. The rest of the apes will remain banana eating, tree swinging apes because they've missed the bus. But in contrast, for the next stage of evolution in human beings, this choice has been given to mankind. The choice is ours. We may choose to remain in our mediocrity. हम ठीक है भाई, हमको कुछ नहीं चाहिए. I am fine as I am. हमको क्या करना है इन सब चीजों से? तो ठीक है भाई. Evolutionary forces, no problem. Remain as you are in the mediocrity. But we may choose to actually consciously collaborate. Collaborate with the evolutionary force. Ask the evolutionary force, please use my being as your laboratory. I want to take that grand leap into the next species. I want to take that grand leap. So we have the option to either consciously choose to collaborate with the evolutionary Shakti or remain as we are. If we collaborate, we will take that leap forward in the march of evolution towards becoming heroic and luminous beings of type, my dear students. What are the 4 beings? Luminous beings of light, love, power, and bliss. Man may consciously choose. Yes, the door is open for all mankind. But only a conscious collaboration will effectuate this mutation. Only we consciously collaborate with Shakti, then this mutation of our being will actually happen. Mankind's destiny awaits his choice. See, वो गाना सुना है? नन्हे मुन्ने बच्चे तेरी मुट्ठी में क्या है? मुट्ठी में है तकदीर हमारी, हमने किस्मत को वश में किया है. हमारी किस्मत हमारी मुट्ठी में है. See, the present stage of evolution has reached at such a stage that it is laboring to deliver through us human beings a consciousness which is far deeper, far vaster, far higher than our present level of consciousness. We have reached that stage where this can happen. But this delivery into the next stage, the new species, cannot be affected by the mind alone. Even by the maximizing of the mind cannot do it. Then what can? Only a comprehensive power of which the mind is only a shadow. And we have talked about that power again and again and again through all the speakers we've heard. That there is that evolutionary force. You can call it Shakti. You can call it the Adhyatmic that is higher than us. You can call it whatever you want. That Shakti herself has that power of realization by which the new species can be born out of us. Now, if we want to call that evolutionary force Shakti, let's call it Shakti. We have to give it a name so we can talk about her. Where is Shakti? Shakti is within us, but it's veiled. Shakti is all around us, everywhere. Shakti transcends us. Well beyond us, Shakti goes. And Shakti transcends all that we can comprehend as the universe. Shakti transcends all that. So Shakti is within us, around us, and it transcends the ever-expanding galaxies also. We can call it Shakti, we can call it Chit Shakti, we can call it the Divine Mother, the Supreme Creatrix Force. Let us for 30 seconds close our eyes and try and connect with Shakti. We'll have faith that Shakti is there. Let us open ourselves to Shakti. Let us call Shakti. Let us hold Shakti within us. It is this Shakti which whispered in our ape body, propelling it to mutate into man. It is the same Shakti which is insistent in us today. This evolutionary force is already at work, and this great birth can come about. But when will it come about? Only and only and only and only if we collaborate with her, if we collaborate with that Shakti. Now, the natural corollary, the natural question that will come from all my beautiful students is, how do we collaborate with Shakti? Right? How do we consciously transform ourselves? So the second part of my paper is only for those students who are really searching, who are seekers, who want to know, how can I collaborate with Shakti? How do I transmute myself? How do I consciously transform myself? Now, if we have to expound on this, it's a very, very lengthy exposition. But we have to bring down the juice, the main points of it. And if I want to make it brief, this lengthy exposition, I will take the help of Sri Aurobindo's words from the Synthesis of Yoga, where he formulates the whole concept of life in utter brevity. He says in the Synthesis of Yoga, all life is yoga. He says this in the Synthesis of Yoga. What does it mean? It means whether I'm running for the prime ministership of the country or I'm just eating my food, whether I'm a teacher or a doctor or a lawyer or a sweeper or a housewife or a cook or a caretaker, whatever I'm doing, I can be doing yoga. I can be doing yoga while I'm doing any of all this. All life is yoga. And then he says, all life must be taken up, but all life must be transformed. The central question that arises here is, at this juncture is, what can we do to bring about this transformation? What can we do to collaborate with this evolutionary force? The traditions in India have not given us only esoteric knowledge. Ki bhai, sit on the Himalayas and do meditation, or sit in your room and meditate for 10 hours. No, they have not given only such methodologies. Our Vedas and Upanishads have given us science of life. They have not given us knowledge that we can only wonder upon. Wow, wow. No, they have simultaneously dwelled upon the science of consciousness. And they have systematized this knowledge in so beautifully and given us methods by which we can actually help ourselves to collaborate with this energy, with Shakti. Now, the science of consciousness is also a very vast topic. But if we want to make it brief, I will try to bring it forth with the help of a few points, right? We have already taken a few steps. What we have done when we have heard Atulji, and we have heard Sampatji, Shiv Kumarji, Shraddhaluji, Alok Pandeyji, all of these speakers have been doing that work for us, of unveiling Shakti for us, unveiling the deep reality, the truth with a capital T, the soul, all that they've done, that they've tried to remove the muck, and that light can be brought forward. Now let us see some simple ways by which we can actually apply in our lives. There are two levers of change in human beings. One is the mind, and the second is the soul or the psychic entity. The mind, Shraddhalu had said, is called Manomaya, and the psychic entity is called Agni. The mind has been described in the Taittiriya Upanishad. Manomaya Prana Sharira Neta. Manomaya Prana Sharira Neta. And this Shraddhaluji had also said that the mind would like to govern the vital and the physical if they listen to it. Sometimes they don't listen to the mind, and that is the time we make our mistakes. So the mind is the leader of the vital and the physical sheets. The soul or the psychic entity has been called in the Kathopanishad as the Angushta Matram, the psychic entity, no bigger than the thumb, who knows the past, who knows the present, and who knows the future. Remember, Om Agni Mire, we call it Ritvijam. It is the knower of the right time. It is also called Jata Veda, that which knows the past, the present, and the future. Now, the first thing to realize is that there is a power, there is a knowledge. Do you think that all the wisdom is locked inside this mental mind? And again, Shraddhaluji helped us. He already told us that it is not, all the wisdom is not here. Beyond our normal mind, there are higher and higher and higher and higher levels of mind. And our mind is only a faint glimmer of all those levels of mind. There are higher and higher levels of consciousness. And our mind has the capacity to connect to these higher and higher levels of consciousness. By becoming receptive to these higher levels of consciousness, higher levels of knowledge, we can gradually expand and consciously transform our limited mental operations. You know, our mind is limited, but it has access to these higher levels. Now, these higher levels of mind have also been referred to in the Rig Veda. The Rig Veda refers to them as 7 rivers. Now, why does the Rig Veda is known for its symbolism? The Rig Veda talks of the Agni, the soul as Agni. Why? Because there is light there, there's luminosity there. Then there's higher levels of consciousness. The Rig Veda uses the symbol of a river. Yes, the flame is an aspirational flame. Absolutely, absolutely. Why does the Rig Veda use the symbolism of river? Because rivers flow from above to the lower regions. And these higher levels of consciousness, they flow from higher levels into our mind when we believe that they are there, when we call them, when we receive them, and when we hold them. Right? So the Rig Vedas have described these higher powers as 7 rivers, out of which only 5 names could be found by people who have done these studies. So the 5 rivers, can we have the next slide, slide 17? They are Mahati or vastness. Mahati is one of the names that has been found in the Rig Veda, which is vastness. Now, if we want to become vaster than ourselves, we have to consciously connect with the higher levels of mind, because vastness is a level of consciousness which is beyond our mind. Then there is Ila or revelation, right? Then there is Saraswati or inspiration. And there is Sarama or intuition. And there is Dakshina or discrimination. Sri Aurobindo has elaborated on these powers of knowledge and these ranges of mind well above our normal human mind. The human mind is only a small province, like a small kingdom of the vast kingdom of knowledge, which is well beyond it, of the universal mind. Now, the intuitive power of the ranges of mind beyond us can become ours also, if we learn to be silently receptive to them. If we learn to become silently receptive, then we can tune into intuition, which is so beautiful if we are able to do that. And do you think that intuition or sarama is something new to human genius? Not at all. The power of intuition is not a new phenomenon. Throughout its moments of genius, this world has tuned into intuition. The great inspirations of the art of Leonardo, the Ninth Symphony of Beethoven, the theory of relativity of Einstein, Newton discovering the law of gravity, the marvelous verses of the Bhagavad Gita. What are all these? These are all a passage of intuition into a receptive human mind. And through the human mind, this was shared with the world. This connectivity with intuition has been a power that has been tapped into by human beings. And for doing this, we need silence of the mind, and we need a clarity of the mind. Albert Einstein has written, and it's very beautiful. He was very brilliant and very witty. He says, we should take care not to make the intellect our God. Sometimes we become very proud of our intellect. But he said, we should take care not to make the intellect our God. It has, of course, powerful muscles, but no personality. The only real valuable thing is intuition. Once we have acknowledged the operations of this intuitive power of mind, we have to ask ourselves, how can we make that power accessible to us? And we will definitely speak about this towards the end of our session today. But to begin with, we need to learn to become more and more silent. As I said in the beginning, we need to become silent. We need to have faith that there exist these higher and higher levels of consciousness. We need to become silent. We need to have faith. We need to become open. We need to call. And we need to receive. And when we are receiving, we must learn how to hold on to that power of intuition. This intuitivizing of our mind can become one of the first steps towards the attainment of a consciousness which is beyond the ordinary human mental consciousness. And though It is unknown, yet there is a certain kind of guidance which will become unerring. We will know that we are being guided, and we will start enjoying that guidance. We will see the hand of that guidance in our daily lives or in some of the occasions of our life. See, ye kaise hua? And then you know that it is some guidance somewhere, someone is guiding me. Someone is helping me. Someone is opening the path forward how to do things. So this was the first lever of change. That is the higher and higher levels of mind, which only the mind can access. Now let's come to the second lever of change. Which is the second lever of change? Type in the chat box, please. There was one, the mind, Manomaya Prana Sharira Neta. Yes, soul, the psychic entity, the psychic fire in the heart, the psychic fire in the heart of man. The second step in the process of transformation is, again, first we have to recognize, have faith that there is a power deep within us, which has a secret relationship with that evolutionary force. It has a hotline, a direct connection with Shakti, with that evolutionary force. There is within us, as mentioned above, a spark no bigger than the thumb, our psychic entity. It has been referred to, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of verses have been dedicated to this fire within by so many rishis. Our Vedas are full of verses which are in praise of this fire, which are calling this fire, which are inviting this fire into our daily work. Beautiful verses. So this is the mystic flame, which is the inmost guide in the deepest cavern of our heart. This mystic flame or spark within us, it is propelling life towards greater and greater expressions and manifestations of consciousness. As we studied this a few days back, I don't remember in which session, that this fire within us is actually a fire of aspiration. It is called the aspirational fire because it aspires within us to grow, and to grow. If we aspire to evolve consciously, we must learn to concentrate on this light, this being, this power, this flame in the center of our heart. As Sri Aurobindo heard its voice, gradually we will start experiencing its living presence. We will experience its presence within us. By inviting it forward to guide our mental being, to guide our vital being, to guide our physical being, we will be able to hasten our evolution. When we talk of evolution, people generally talk of Darwin. I have a little problem there. And I want that our students must understand that Darwin was right. So far as he was talking of the physical evolution of form, but he was incomplete. Why he was incomplete? He spoke about the physical evolution of form. But can the physical evolve without an evolution of actual consciousness? Can the physical evolve without evolution of consciousness? Somebody type in the chat box. No, Riddhikalra says. How can it? First, consciousness evolves. My consciousness evolves from here to here. When it evolves from here to here, it pulls a form to a higher form. That is what happened in the whole process of evolution, from the inconscient to matter, to vegetation, to insects, to animals, to higher animals, to ape, to man. What evolved? The consciousness evolved. And when consciousness evolved, it pulled the form to a higher form. Right? So we must remember that Darwin may be right so far as the evolution of form is concerned, but he is incomplete. It is the evolution of consciousness which leads to the evolution of form. To evolve, we have to do so much. So Kirit uncle used to say something very beautiful. So he used to say, to collaborate with this evolutionary force, we need to combine the dexterity of an engineer. The dexterity of an engineer with the patience of a scientist. Patiently, we have to become dexterous. We have to combine the power of a heroic warrior with the adoration, the surrender of the lover of the divine. So much effort we have to do. In the end, let me clarify, to whatever extent possible, the work that has to be done in the mental field, in the vital field, and in the physical being. Because all the three have to be consciously transformed. Let us first dwell on the faculty of the mind. For the evolution of our mind, we must undergo 5 processes. First, we must submit our egoistic pride. As Shraddhaluji said so clearly, we do not have to submit our ego, because the ego is me. I have to submit my egoistic pride, the ego-ness, the sense of ego that I have. So we must submit our egoistic pride of the mind. And where is Shakti? Within us, all around us, and beyond us. So we must be able to submit this egoistic pride and offer it to Shakti for purification. Secondly, our awareness inwards. Inwards and inwards we go towards our psychic entity. Thirdly, we must be able to lift our mind so that it dwells on higher and higher and higher objects of knowledge. Right? It is important to do our everyday studies and everything, but we must take out time to dwell on higher and higher realms of knowledge. This will lead to a clarity of the mind. There won't be fogs in the mind. And this is what we have done in the last 9 days in the spiritual retreat. We have dwelled on higher objects of learning. Fourth, we must perfect. This is the work of Mahasaraswati. Skills. We must perfect the capacities of the mind, like power of thinking, power of analyzing, power of rationalizing, collating. All these are powers of the mind. Not only that, we have to chisel all our faculties of music, dance, poetry, all these. In short, we must amplify our genius, right? This is the fourth. And fifth and most important, we must take out time daily to practice silencing of the mind. We must silence our mind. The mind must become utterly tranquil, utterly silent, immobile, just like a pond is on a breezeless day. You see, when there is no breeze and the pond is still, then the light of the stars can be seen in the pond. Similarly, when we become tranquil and we become quiet and we become silent, the light of supermind, overmind, intuitive mind, illumined mind, higher mind start reflecting on our mind, because the mind is becoming clearer and clearer. And not only clearer and clearer, the mind is becoming silent, and it will start reflecting the higher minds into ourselves. This is the process of tapping Shakti into the mental being. And this work is the work of the house of wisdom. And who is the goddess of this house? The goddess of wisdom is Maheshwari. So, evolution of mind, submission first, submission of the egoistic pride, submission of the egoistic pride of the mind to the workings of Shakti. Second, deepening of our awareness, inwards and inwards and inwards we go towards the psychic entity. Third, lifting the mind to dwell on higher and higher objects of knowledge. Fourth, perfection of the capacities of the mind. Fifth, and the most important, silencing of the mind. Sri Aurobindo has described the higher ranges of mind as the higher mind, illumined mind, intuitive mind, overmind, and then the supermind, right? So this is all about the mind. Now, what do we have to do for the vital? What do we have to do to transform our vital being? It is a very, very difficult purification. Very difficult purification, because this is where we breed all the dualities. Our pride, our anger, jealousy, greed, dishonesty, selfishness, all of it is bred here. It is breeding here in our vital being. What we have to do is we have to channelize the flow of Shakti. How we have to collect it, we have to dam it, and then we have to learn to drill Shakti into our vital being. To drill Shakti into our vital being so much that the throbs of our heart and emotions, they just spontaneously receive Shakti. They receive gladly this Shakti, this benign flow of the triumphant Shakti. And in our vital being, what do we have to develop? We have to develop harmony, oneness, love, wideness, truth, sweetness, compassion. All these must flow spontaneously. Spontaneously. This is the work of the house of harmony. And who is the goddess of the house of harmony? The goddess of the house of harmony is Mahalakshmi. So we have to work on our meaning. And together with that, we have to work on our skills. All the skills that we can muster up, whether you're doing craft, or you're doing batik, or you're just cleaning your room, or you're just setting your cupboard, but you're doing it skillfully, deftly, or you're organizing your cupboard, your desk, your drawers, you're organizing them, but you're organizing them skillfully, beautifully, in an organized manner. That is the work of the house of perfection. And the goddess of perfection is Mahasaraswati. It is these four goddesses who run the world. It is Shakti, which has four powers: Maheshwari, Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, and Mahasaraswati. Someday we'll talk about it. How these four facets of Shakti are actually running this world so beautifully. Evolution of the vital. First of all, most important is oneness, love, harmony, sweetness, compassion, truth, bhakti, and so much more. Right, students? You want to just pause for 30 seconds on this, and then we'll move to the most important part of the paper, because this is where we will see that part of Sri Aurobindo's yoga which has not been written by anybody ever before, which goes beyond all the literature that we've studied. So let us just pause here for 30 seconds. Now I come to the most important part of the paper, of this session. Sri Aurobindo's yoga also involves the transformation of the physical body. This has not been spoken about by anybody else. In the field of the physical body, the task of the permeation of that Shakti, you can call it the supramental Shakti, call it what you want. But that Shakti must be able to permeate into the cells of the body, into the very consciousness of the cells of the body. And this is the most Herculean task. It is the most difficult task, but it can be done because we are human beings and we have a choice. Now, within this being, within this human body, there is a spring, there is a lever, we've heard about it. Now that nucleus, that soul, is not just here. That nucleus, that soul, is in the nucleus of each and every cell of our body. Our body has zillions and zillions and zillions of cells. And the nucleus of each cell is the soul itself. It is empowered by that soul, right? Now, what do we need to do? Sri Aurobindo has assured us of this presence of the Supreme Shakti, which is lying latent in each cell of our body, latent in the cells. Now, how does the atom bomb work? Just as the atom, which has energy inside it, when it is bombarded with energy, it releases enormous energy from within it. This energy of the cell, from outside energy is injected into it and it becomes a huge bomb of energy. Even so, when we tap Shakti, Shakti which is all around us, Shakti which is inside us, now that Shakti which is all around us, and we allow it to permeate into our very cells, into the nucleus of our cells, the cells of our body, where true Shakti is lying latent, sleeping, so to say. Every cell, when injected with Shakti from outside, will release the omnipotent Shakti which is latent inside. The more we invite this power of Shakti to work in us, the greater will be our response to her. Yeah? The more we invite this Shakti to inject herself into our cells, into the nucleus of every cell, because in the nucleus of every cell, there is Shakti herself lying. And then we inject that Shakti into the nucleus of every cell, and this Shakti becomes millionfold in every cell. This is the work of the house of strength. And the goddess of the house of strength is Mahakali. I would like to end here with some words of Sri Aurobindo's from his beautiful poem, Savitri. Read it, close your eyes, and then think about it, and I'll read it out while you imagine this happening to you. Almighty powers are shut in nature's cells. A greater destiny waits you in your front. Authors of earth's high change, to you it is given to cross the dangerous spaces of the soul and touch the mighty mother stark awake and meet the omnipotent in this house of flesh and make of life the million-bodied one. Let's read it again. Almighty powers are shut in nature's cells. A greater destiny waits you in your front. Authors of earth's high change, to you it is given to cross the dangerous spaces of the soul and touch the mighty mother stark awake and meet the omnipotent in this house of flesh and make of life the million-bodied one. Thank you, my dear students. Thank you, teachers. Thank you, all guests.
I wanted to ask if you could explain the last line of the poem.
And make of life the million-bodied one. So right now, we think that we are only this body. Hum khali isme samaye hue. But actually, the divine is what? We've learned that the divine is everywhere. We have to become vaster and vaster and vaster than our own being. So we have to become the million-bodied one. We have to become so vast that there is no division between me and the rest. There is only one. Right?
Ma'am, I had a question. Ma'am,
Yes.
after surrendering to the divine, is it possible that we recognize what we are going to evolve?
See, we do not, if it was helpful for us to know the future, God would have given us the vision to see the future. But God has not given us that vision. If He has not given the vision, then that means that we just need to see the next step, and the next step. Reach there and then see the next step. So we cannot know from now what will be the last, where will we reach, हम कहाँ पहुँचेंगे, क्या बन जाएंगे, ये हमारे बस का नहीं है.
Ma'am, we just need to move forward.
Yes, we have to have our vision right, our focus right, our aim is to be clear, right?
Yes.
What is my aim? That I want to collaborate with Shakti and I want to take the leap into the next species. I want to move forward that way. That is my aim. And for that, I have to consciously transform myself. And
Yes.
when that day we were saying to that, we're talking about that fellow inside, that beautiful fellow light full of luminosity inside, we don't only offer him all good things, that paratha kha rahe hain, so good things I'm offering. No, there are times when I really can't resist and I'm going to do something wrong. That is the most important thing to offer. When I know I'm going to do something wrong and I can't resist, I have to do it. Then I go before him and I say, oh, my sweet fellow, my friend, my lover, my sweetness, I offer this to you. I'm not being able to resist this pull of the wrong towards which I'm going. I offer it to you. Please help me. Om Agni Mire Purohitam Yagyasya. Become the Purohit in this Yagya. Lead me forward. Lead me on the right path. Ritasya Pantaha. Take me towards the right path. Right?
Yes, ma'am.
Like,
Yes.
how can we connect to divine with Shakti? Like Sri Aurobindo, he was seeing Sri Krishna everywhere, and that is also a type of a connection with divine. So, like, how can we connect with divine using Shakti?
So we have already said how we can connect. We have to use the lever of the mind,
Yes.
Manomaya, yeah, by making it more and more silent, by submitting our ego to it, by what else had we said? Submit your ego, dwell on higher and higher objects of knowledge. Now we have heard about Shraddhaluji's talks, evenings with Shraddhalu. We are going to hear that. That is that third point where we said that you concentrate on higher and higher objects. Then what else was there? Has anybody written down the points? Then we have to go inwards, deeper and deeper inwards, so that we are able to connect with the Krishna within, connect with the fellow within, our friend within. And the most important was take out time daily for meditating, for silencing the mind. Because silence of the mind is the time when the mind becomes silent, then the higher minds will reflect on this silent mind. This is what we have to do with the mind. Then we talked about the vital being, that we have to concentrate on that oneness. We have to aspire for that oneness. We have to aspire for love, that we are able to love more and more. Then sweetness, compassion, and bhakti, all that will be able to transform our vital being. For the physical being, he said that we meditate upon Shakti and allow that Shakti, drill that Shakti into the very cells, so that our cells become very powerful. They have Shakti inside them, and Shakti from outside is drrrr, and that Shakti becomes huge and very powerful. Okay, Akshat?
As we got to know that, ma'am, our next species, ma'am, will have light, love, power, and bliss. And do we know, ma'am, that how many species are left to evolve and, ma'am, the perfect divine, ma'am, again?
Speaks of yugas and yugas, but the work has to go on. The ape didn't know when it will evolve into a Saranch and an Anjali. Those apes whose bodies were ready, fit, they were transmuted. Similarly, we don't know when this will happen, but we have to consciously work on the work of transformation so that the evolution takes place faster.
One thing may be said in this regard, that the higher the stage of evolution which is reached, for the next stage to reach, the time taken is much lesser compared to the previous one. For humanity, Mother said that because they have been waiting for something higher, because they are consciously aspiring for it, so it will take much lesser time than what it took for the mental evolution. Since you are mentioning the next species and all, I assume that what they did, the mission for which Sri Aurobindo and Mother. So when she was pointedly asked by a child in the playground that, Mother, you say that the new world is born, but where is the new species? So there's only one response like that. She said, oh, just wait a few thousand years. That's all she said at that time. This was 1957. And it is also understood that there were many intermediate species between the Homo sapiens that is there now, and the pure, what you will call a animal, basically ape and all that. A lot of them, like Neanderthal and Australopithecus and this and that, they say they were 8 or 9, but in the process, they have gone and one has remained. So similarly, Mother said this, that for the full supramental being which is going to be there in the future, the pure next species, between that and the current highest level on the earth called the human being, there will be many transitional beings. So how many, that she did not specify, but basically there will be.
And another thing that I heard was, or I read somewhere, was that the divine chooses a certain species for that progression. But if that species does not collaborate to the extent to which the divine is expecting it to, then the divine changes its plan and
Yes.
uses another species. So earlier the divine had thought of using the dolphin for the purpose of evolution. And that is why we keep hearing about the mermaid, which was half dolphin and half human being. But it didn't work out. So he shifted to man. Now, if man doesn't work out, he may just choose any other. It doesn't matter to him. So, and then we may remain the mediocre man that we are. So, it's very important to actually collaborate.
Infinite gratitude, Anjali ma'am, for nudging us and making us realize that a great task lies ahead of us. We
Yes.
cannot go into our cocoons. We should not have any comfort zones. Evolution has to happen, and we cannot be left behind. We cannot be like the ape who was left behind. Well, Jaipurians shouldn't be those apes. And I'm grateful to you for this session, for repeating. I think more and more repetition is definitely needed in this, because this is profound knowledge and it cannot happen in a day. So we have to go back to it time and again and listen to it.